Joined now by charting man Dan McDermott from thechartguys.com. Dan, welcome back.
Glad to be back, James. Thanks for having me.
Dan, I'm sensing that you must have had a couple of interesting days this week, given the huge volatility, the bounce. What's happening in your universe?
Absolutely. It's been a great bounce. I specialize in oversold bounces. I don't know why. I love them, and my results tell me to keep playing them. It's just one of my strengths as a trader. So when we get extreme sentiment to the downside, that's when I pay attention. And we get to a point, again, where I think the last time we talked, where there is nobody left to go bearish. Everybody that's going to short has shorted. And that's when we see the shift, and that's when we see the bounce take place. So scaling in a little bit, but went in heavy on the gap down open yesterday, and scaling out today on the gap up opens, and just enjoying the volatility and the really nice bounce. And again, it just goes back to everybody looking in one direction, and that's when it's time to be contrarian and start looking in the other direction.
Okay, so I guess it's been a purely technical trade for the most part for you, even though one might suggest that to what extent would you say that Trulieve's excellent quarter, in stark contrast to the rest of the sector, had a sort of a calming effect and might have been, at least in some respects, psychologically responsible for some reversal sentiment?
Yeah, that's the right word, psychological. So this most recent trade, definitely technicals played a part in it. I'm looking at the 4-hour RSI, and it's at historical bounce levels on CGC. So that's when I pay attention. But it's more psychological, absolutely. Again, it's everybody looking in one direction. So the fact that TRU had bullish earnings, it only helps. It keeps people confident. It keeps people, I was shocked at their numbers, and they are serving 1.13% of the Florida population right now. And if we get 2020 legalization in Florida, their market cap is going to, or their target market is going to increase by over 1,000%. So TRUL is just proving that it is positioned very well for progress. And there's not even edibles in Florida yet. So a bright future ahead for TRUL. And it was, like I said, it keeps sentiment, it's not Stokes. It's the opposite of Stokes. It culls some fear in the sector. I don't think it's leading to this bounce right now in Canadian MJ. I think the Canadian MJ earnings saw extreme bearish reactions. We saw money start to flow into the US MJ sector Thursday, Friday, Monday. And in my opinion, this is just big boys, the banks, Bank of America putting out an upgrade on CGC today. To me, that means, hey, we bought this extreme fear over the last couple of days. Now we're going to put out an upgrade and have retail FOMO chase and drive this price up for us. So they're playing their usual games. They were ready for this to buy the extreme sentiment, but it is looking nice in the USMJ space. If we can get some weekly trend changes in USMJ, it's definitely going to be a big sigh of relief for the sector as a whole.
Sure. To what extent do you think today's vote in the House about federal deprohibition, that's just not a non-event for you?
No, and the headlines, you see that I got a text from my buddy last night. Is Congress voting to legalize marijuana? No, the headline is misleading. There's a congressional committee that's voting on a bill. If that passes, which it likely will, it'll go to the Congress. If the Congress passes, which it probably will, it'll go to the Senate, and then it won't probably ever get voted on. It's not going anywhere. The SAFE Act has a way better chance of getting passed than this current bill that the headlines are talking about. But again, it's just all a game, and it was nice timing for this headline to come out. And this headline came out Monday, and we still saw weakness right after this headline came out for all of Monday. But it is what people can now point to for a reason. Again, CNBC and people that trade these markets need a reason. The ones that don't understand the psychological and technical aspect of things, they need a reason for moves to be taking place. So they're looking at this. I got a news alert from Fidelity yesterday saying MJ sector is bouncing on the news of this vote taking place. No, that news came out, Sunday night? I saw those headlines Monday. We dumped Monday. So no, that's not the reason.
Right. Interesting. Is it your contention that the vote, it won't be voted on in the Senate because the Senate's Republican controlled and it's a democratically sponsored initiative?
Absolutely. With what's going on in the Senate right now, there is no chance Mitch McConnell is going to bring this bill up to be voted on. And again, SAFE Act has some bipartisan support. Mitch did go out to the West. He did visit some MJ states. He probably will have some incentive personally to have that go through. But even that is going to be facing a bunch of hurdles just because of the impeachment environment that's currently going on. So it's nice. It's nice for the headlines. It's nice for sentiment. It's nice to get the conversation going. But, reality of this bill having a chance to pass without a change in president or a change in the majority in the Senate is just not going to happen.
Sure. If you look closely at the Trulieve financials, the revenue number was $70 million. And their fair value adjustment on the growth of their biological assets was $90 million. So in terms of the total gross profit of $110 million, it's like almost 90% of that was biological assets. And so if you look at that ratio of biological assets to revenue, it's very questionable. And so I'm curious as to to what degree is the 55 cents per share net income reported a result of some creative accounting on the biological assets number. And so when fully absorbed by the market and taken into context, and people say, oh, well, geez, that's not really the big profit that it seems to be, because it's based on future inventory reaching maturity, which is always also based on the price that you're going to realize when you sell it being the same as when you account for it. So I'm just curious as to what extent, if that financial statement was ultimately believed to be less credible than it is currently being sort of bandied forth in the market by mainstream financial media, do you think that the resumption of the downward cycle could actually set in here before Thanksgiving maybe, and certainly before Christmas?
No, it would have happened by now if that were going to be you're absolutely right. There's plenty of examples of creative accounting in this space in the past half year that we can point to. But in my opinion, the market would have already responded to that. I mean, the pattern for TRUL earnings has been, maybe even the last 4 or 5 of them, has been to sell off in reaction to earnings. And this is the first time we're seeing that not happen. So while you may absolutely be correct that, that number isn't exactly what it seems, and they might even have had a lease back, maybe $14 million from a lease back deal of some of their property that could be included. I haven't actually looked into the specific details, but I don't believe that. I mean, the market is telling us that it doesn't really care right now, and it's future looking. And I do believe that 2020, 1 year from now in 2020, when we're seeing votes happen in New Jersey and Florida and other states, I think that the market is starting to anticipate, even though it seems early to me. A year pricing stuff in is definitely early, but it is starting to anticipate that, fall of 2020 is going to see some USMJ hype. And I do believe that TRUL has been in a daily and weekly uptrend for a couple months at this point. It has clearly been the USMJ sector leader. So as long as we don't see any kind of 20% drop, I think everything is just fine. And the market is saying that the worst is over for now. And if we can see some daily trend changes in the Canadian MJ space, that's only going to help. The more fear that we can see alleviated from either side of the border, the better it's going to be heading into 2020.
Yeah, awesome, Dan. Okay, let's take a walk through your charts here and see how they support your theses as usual.
So just to start things off, the S&P 500 is still hitting all-time highs. And again, any kind of environment where the markets are in euphoric bull mode can only help any sector, even the ones that are struggling. But looking at CGC, the 4-hour RSI is something I mentioned. So look at the 4-hour RSI where we were at the low of Friday, and actually, nope, the low of Monday, and the open of Tuesday, and we can see that we were down at about 17. And I can scroll back and look at history and say, okay, what is the lowest price, or what is the lowest RSI level that we see on dumps for CGC? We hit 19 back in mid-October. Looking at the dump in July, we dropped down to 17. Looking at this dump, we dropped down to 22. And I can scroll back and say, wow, this is the lowest 4-hour RSI we've seen in multiple years. And the times where it has hit this level in the past, it has bounced. And right on cue, we now have a beautiful, very significant 20% bounce from the lows right on that RSI signal. So that signal alone isn't enough, but that is definitely a confidence builder for those of us that look to play dips. So aside from that, we need daily trend changes. What this move is doing now is, number one, huge volume. Let's not disregard that. We still have 4.5 hours in the trading day. We are going to see the highest bull volume day in terms of number of shares that we've seen since we were trading back in the $50 range. That is very notable. So certainly paying attention. You can see the last big bull volume day, volume was 11 million. Here we are, we're going to pass 11 million at noon. So very notable bull volume in response to the upgrade by Bank of America. So anything under 2168 is just a daily lower high. We are not changing this daily trend, and this is the anti-FOMO, fear of missing out. If you are not in a position right now, there is no need to panic. We're not just going to run forever, and that's that. We're going to top out, in my opinion, under 2168. We're going to then look for a daily higher low to form compared to 1381. And then from there, we're going to see, can the bulls change the daily trend, which is something they have struggled to do for 2 to 3 months. So that is where I'm going to be looking to make my next solid play. The bears are absolutely patiently waiting until tomorrow or Friday to be looking for the daily lower high to be set and for more significant consolidation to take place. So I have sold the majority of my bounce position, and actually, no, I'm all cash. So I have sold at this point all of my bounce position from entries end of last week, and then most of my entry was Monday morning first thing, and I keep getting my days mixed up. It was Tuesday morning first thing. But now I'm patiently waiting, and I will look for an entry on a daily high or low, and I will put my stop loss under the low of 1381, risking only bounce profits at this point. So that is my game plan going forward. As far as the USMJ space is concerned, TRUL has been our technical sector leader for a very long time. The weekly trend changed long ago. The weekly trend change was back mid-October, and wow, long ago. I guess that was only 5 weeks, but we followed through with it. And this is the highest price that we've seen in 6 months. So let's zoom out because we are looking for a monthly equilibrium on TRUL. We have our high, all-time low, so all-time high, all-time low, lower high, held support with our higher low, and we're going to be looking for a lower high compared to 2165, and then consolidation into the start of 2020. All depends on where we top out. You know, we have a ton of space to work with. We could keep going up for another month, but that is the broader pattern that we are watching for, and bulls will be looking to enter for a monthly higher low sometime in early to mid 2020 to then be looking for an equilibrium bull break heading into the fall of 2020 and the vote. So I don't usually do predictions, and this is not a prediction. This is just the setup that I will be looking for. But I think if you look back 1 year from now and look at what ended up playing out on this chart, I bet it's going to be fairly similar to what we're looking for here. Curaleaf also had earnings, and they are responding bullish as well. So again, the more space that we create to try and change trends, the better. If we look on this weekly time frame, we've seen some great 30% plus bounces, but never a weekly higher low and higher high. So we have another weekly bounce where anything under 1084 is a weekly lower high. What we have to see is the top out of this move, wherever it is, form a weekly higher low compared to 594, and then change the weekly trend. And if we can see that happen, that is when we're going to notice a notable shift in the sector, because it'll be the first time since all-time highs that that has happened. Curaleaf is the sector leader as far as size, so technical sector leader, size sector leader, and definitely two of the top names in the USMJ space that have our attention. We have a slight sentiment shift. What we need is follow through. We need daily trend changes in Canadian MJ. We need weekly trend changes in USMJ. And it's going to be an interesting 2020. And I anticipate the bulls will have plenty of opportunity, specifically heading into voting season.
Dan, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been awesome to talk to you as usual. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
See you then, James. Thanks.